Donald Trump's victory in Iowa on Monday night no doubt popped a bubble in many Americans' minds as to the reality that he is more than likely to represent the Republican Party on the 2024 presidential election ballot for the third cycle in a row. Fact is that most people are not paying attention to the polls 10 months out from Election Day. And honestly, that's completely fair. They're not going to tell you exactly what's going to happen come November 5th. And so for the normal people out there, there's no point in stressing out about it right now. That said, they do paint a pretty clear picture as to the state of the race between incumbent Democratic president and, for better or for worse, as we'll get into later, the presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and the overwhelming favorite to secure the Republican nomination in the coming months, former Republican President Donald Trump. Now, Joe Biden's approval rating entering 2024 was 39%, according to Gallup, which was tied for the second lowest mark of his entire presidency. It's also the lowest of any president in modern history, and a full 6 points below where Trump's approval rating was entering 2020, at 45%. Now, that was, of course, before the COVID-19 pandemic changed everything we had thought would happen in that election, but the point stands as this. Biden's re-election prospects at this point in time are as weak as any president in recent memory. But is it enough for Trump to be favored in the decisive Electoral College in a potential rematch this November? That's the question we're looking to answer in this video. My name is Ryan Guest, and I appreciate you joining me for a dive into the state of the 2024 presidential race based on the latest polling averages in every state. Let's jump right over to the map, where we'll start by giving Joe Biden all of the states that he is sure to win. Those include Washington, Oregon, California and Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Maine's 1st Congressional District, Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. And for the states that Donald Trump will definitely win, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska at large, as well as the 1st and 3rd congressional districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. Now, each of these states went to Biden or Trump by margins greater than 10% in 2020. And we have no reason to believe at this point in time that they won't back the same candidate by a comfortable margin once again here in 2024. Now, with these states allocated, Democrats have an 191 to 122 electoral college vote advantage. This is thanks in large part to the 101 electoral votes they get from California, Illinois, and New York alone. 3 of these 6 largest states in the country by population, they've backed Democrats by wide margins since the 80s. We also have several states that definitively lean in one direction, but are likely to be decided by single-digit margins in this election. They are states that could become competitive if one candidate were to win in a landslide, but otherwise have a very good chance of backing a given candidate in this election based on a more comprehensive analysis of the state of play, including prediction markets, forecaster ratings, demographic favorability, and of course, trends and shifts in recent elections. In other words, while safe or solid states that you see here may be defined as one party has a clear edge and the race is not competitive, these likely and lean states are those where one party has an edge, but an upset is possible. Now, for the purposes of this video, the likely states, those in the second darkest shade, are those where the polling margin is between 7 to 12%, while lean states, the second lightest shade, are between 2 to 7%, and tilt states, which we'll get to at the end of the video, the lightest color, are 0 to 2%. Starting in Alaska, the last frontier state has backed Republicans in every election since 1964, but Trump's 10-point margin of victory in 2020 was the lowest for a Republican in over 3 decades, and Alaska did shock the nation in 2022 when it elected its first Democratic U.S. representative since 1973. Now, just 2 polls have surveyed the race in 2024 so far in Alaska, both from the Alaska Survey Research Center, and Trump led by 8 points in October and 7 points in July. All things considered, Alaska should still end up firmly in the Trump camp. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, Biden won by a 10.8-point margin in 2020, and he leads by an average of 7.8% in the 3 polls recorded here since October of 2022. New Mexico should end up comfortably in the Biden column, but as is the case with Biden in Alaska, there is an outside chance of Trump making some noise here. Both Iowa and Ohio are on very similar trajectories, having voted for Trump by margins between 8 to 9 points in both 2016 and 2020, after having backed Democrat Barack Obama in both 2008 and 2012. In terms of polling data, Race to the White House's averages have Trump leading Biden by 8.6% in Iowa and 8.5% in Ohio. These are eerily similar numbers, and it's fair to say that Trump is once again a heavy favorite to carry Iowa's 6 electoral votes and Ohio's 17 electoral votes. They're both likely Trump states in 2024. Up in Minnesota, polling has Biden ahead by 3.5 points. Minnesota actually holds the current record for longest streak of voting Democratic of any state in the entire country. It hasn't voted for a Republican presidential candidate since Richard Nixon in 1972. Now, it has, though, been decided by single-digit margins in 8 of those elections, including each of the last 3, as Hillary Clinton defeated Trump by 1.5 points in 2016, and Biden won by 7.5 points in 2020. The current polling here in Minnesota does mean that it leans towards Biden in 2024. 3.5% is by no means a comfortable margin, but I do fully expect Biden to win Minnesota in November. Over in New Hampshire, it backed Biden in 2020 by a very similar margin to Minnesota at 7.4%, and it has not voted for a Republican since 2004. It is consistently the most competitive state in the Northeast, however, and as of the latest polling average from Race to the White House, Biden's lead is 6.7%. That is just below the cutoff to label New Hampshire as a likely Biden state. Instead, it will join Minnesota in the lean column. Filling out the Northeast, Maine has consistently voted Democratic in 8 straight presidential races, but like Minnesota, is often decided by a less than safe margin. The latest polling average here actually has Biden in front by only 1.1%, well within the margin of error. Though there's a big asterisk here, as this average is only based on 2 polls. The first being Emerson College, which has Biden in front by 11 points, but since it was taken in September of 2022, it obviously doesn't hold much weight. Rather, the latest poll from D-rated pollster Digital Research had Biden in front by just 1 point. Maine does consistently vote to the left of both New Hampshire and Minnesota, so while it does go in the tilt Democrat territory based on this polling average, I'm not expecting its blue streak to end in 2024. The second district, though, on the other hand, has now backed Trump in back-to-back elections, and should again in 2024. The only poll surveying this race has Trump ahead of Biden by 14%, so it will go down as safe Republican on this polling-based map. Down in Virginia, a formerly reliably Republican state, now a Democratic-leaning state. Outside of Glenn Youngkin's surprise victory in the 2021 gubernatorial election here, Democrats have won every major statewide election in the Commonwealth since 2009. Biden carried Virginia's 13 electoral votes by 11 points in 2020, and the latest polling average from Race to the White House has the Democrat in front by 5.2% in Virginia based on 8 polls included in the average, meaning that it will lean Biden on the map. That leaves Florida, and Texas as the final two states with a high degree of lean toward one candidate, based on a wider range of factors, such as recent results and the aforementioned factors like prediction markets and industry consensus. Polling in Texas is very positive for the Trump campaign right now, as he leads Biden in an average of 9 polls by 6.9%. That places Texas just barely in the lean column, a tenth of a point from the likely category. Now, based on other factors, lean is probably a more accurate reflection of this race. Trump's 5.6-point win in 2020 was the narrowest for a Republican in Texas since 1996. And the Lone Star State has trended almost 10 points more towards Democrats since 2012 compared to the rest of the country. Florida, on the other hand, is on a completely opposite trajectory, as Trump won in 2020 by 3.4%, making it one of just 8 states where he actually did better than in 2016. The 2022 midterms also saw a localized red wave in Florida, as incumbent Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio, both Republicans, were reelected by 19 and 16 points, respectively. The Sunshine State's strong rightward trend in recent elections has translated over to polls for 2024 as well, where Trump leads Biden by an average of 10.3%, according to a weighted average of 18 polls. That means that Florida goes down as likely Republican. And now we're down to the 7 states that will really decide the 2024 presidential election. We'll start in North Carolina, where we have an average based on 19 polls, weighted of course by recency, and Trump leads by an average of 6.7%, making it a lean Trump state. North Carolina has voted Republican by less than 4 points in each of the last 3 presidential elections, and while the Biden campaign will be actively looking to flip the state this November, I do fully expect Democrats to fall short once again, as that seems to be the trend here, with Republicans also winning 4 straight U.S. Senate races in North Carolina by less than 6 points as well. In Georgia, recent polling has been very bad for Biden as well, as Trump leads in this critical battleground by 6.7%, based on an average of 29 polls surveyed here. Biden has not led in a single poll since June of last year, while Trump has led by at least 5 points in 5 straight. So it'll join North Carolina in the lean Republican column, becoming the first flip on this map, as Biden did win Georgia in 2020, albeit narrowly, by 0.2%. Georgia is a state, though, modeling the 2 primary demographics that the Democratic Party is trying to form its coalition around: Black voters and college-educated suburbs. So Biden's dismal polling numbers right now here carry an extra level of concern, so to speak, for the DNC, as their breakthrough in this traditionally conservative state had opened up a wider range of possibilities for their electoral prospects in the future. Now, you guys know on this channel that I love to compare and contrast, and so the state of Nevada is the perfect state for that reason to go after Georgia, as Republicans have been eyeing a flip in the all-things-go state for about a decade due to its favorable demographics for the party, an ever-present Hispanic population that has shown signs of softening in support for Democrats, as well as a growing working class that has played a role in Nevada's slow trend towards Republicans in recent years. Trump is polling well in Nevada, leading Biden by 2.1% based on a 19-poll average. He has led in 5 straight, all from well-regarded pollsters: Emerson College, Morning Consult, and Siena College. That means that Nevada will lean Republican, and if you have not already understood why Democratic strategists are hammering the panic button in many rooms across the country, I'm sure you're starting to now. Trump now has 257 electoral votes. He's 13 shy of 270. As we move to Arizona, where once again, current polls show that Joe Biden would lose a state that he won in 2020. Democrats have won 3 straight Senate races in Arizona by at least 3 points, but Trump is leading Biden by 5.5 points per race to the White House's polling average, based on 28 polls. Another dismal data point for the Biden re-elect: Arizona leans Trump as well. meaning he needs to win just one of the 3 states remaining to hit 270. Biden, meanwhile, would need to win all 3. Now, before we dive into the Rust Belt trio, let's discuss Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, where we unfortunately do not have any polls in this race so far. Nebraska and Maine do split their electoral votes, awarding 2 to the statewide winner and 1 per congressional district. And while Nebraska at large is solidly Republican, its Omaha-based 2nd district is much more urban and college-educated than the rest of the states. And Joe Biden won it by nearly 7 points in the 2020 election. It was redistricted following the 2020 census to be a few points more favorable to Republicans with the new district lines, and it has been represented by a Republican in Congress since 2017. But Biden is still favored to win here according to nearly every major forecaster, so I will put it down as leaning Democrat for now in place of the absence of polling. Alrighty, the infamous Rust Belt trio of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania strikes once more. They each backed Trump in 2016 by less than 8 points, and then Biden in 2020 by less than 3 points. In both cases, they proved decisive. Had Hillary Clinton won these 3 in 2016, she would have been elected president. And had Trump won them in 2020, he would be serving a 2nd term right now. Surprisingly, Biden is performing best in Wisconsin right now. He actually leads Trump by over a point based on 16 polls in this race, meaning that it tilts Democrat on the map. I say surprisingly because Wisconsin has voted to the right of Michigan and Pennsylvania in the last few presidential elections, and demographically speaking, it's both whiter and less college-educated than the other 2. Now, granted, abortion rights have been a more salient issue of more importance in Wisconsin since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in early 2022, with a high-profile state Supreme Court race and gubernatorial election going Democrats' way, in large part because of it. But looking at Michigan, Trump leads by 3.7%. That's remarkably bad for Biden, given that he won Michigan by nearly 3 points in 2020, and it's the largest margin that he won with in any of the 7 key battlegrounds in this election. And it's even as Democrats have had a string of strong performances across the state since then. Nevertheless, Michigan leans Republican as a result of that polling average. And finally, let's take a look at Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, both in name and practice, perhaps the most important state in the 2024 election. If there's one state where the polling average could tell you the most about the state of the race, it's here. Race to the White House has Biden leading Trump by 0.2%, just 0.2 of a percentage point. Now, this average is based on 31 polls, with the latest and most heavily weighted poll coming from the highly rated Quinnipiac University, showing Biden in front by 3%. This would of course mean that Pennsylvania joins Wisconsin in the tilt Democrat column, meaning this video's tipping point state is Michigan, whose 15 electoral votes put him over the top. Trump holds a grand total of 283 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 255, having flipped Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia in the Sun Belt, and Michigan in the Rust Belt. Now, if this were to end up being the final 2024 electoral map, which I would caution is highly unlikely, it would, however, mean that this was one of the most competitive presidential elections in American history. Keep in mind that a candidate has won the presidential election with under 300 electoral votes just 3 times over the last 100 years. This would be the 4th. That does it though for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you think of this map, as well as any other videos you would like to see in the future. Shout out to my channel members on screen here. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, go ahead and click that join button below this video as well to receive exclusive perks. Make sure to subscribe to my channel down below for more content like this, and please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out electionpredictionsofficial.com for my 2024 presidential election forecast. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.